Now, the next question that I want to go over is question number 20 from chapter 4. Now, this question gives us a simple balanced chemical reaction. It says KClO2 yields KCl plus O2. And it asks us for the oxidation numbers of potassium, chlorine, oxygen, both on the reactant side and the product side. Now, on the reactant side, well, we're forming an ionic compound, which is potassium chloride. And if you remember, well, potassium is in group 1 of the periodic table, so it's going to have a charge or an oxidation number of +1. Now, we're left then with ClO2, which ClO2 is going to have a charge of -1. Each oxygen on the periodic, or each oxygen is going to have a -2 charge. We've got 2 of them, but for our oxidation number assignment, we're going to call that -2. So then we're looking at this as, what do we have to add to 2 times -2? So what do we have to add to -4 to equal -1? And the correct answer there would be +3. Okay, now the next part of this says, well, what are our oxidation numbers for the product side? What is potassium? What is chlorine? What is oxygen? Well, potassium is still found on the periodic table in the first spot. It's going to be +1. Now, chlorine is a little bit, potassium is in group 1 of the periodic table, so it's going to be +1. Chlorine's a little bit funky. Chlorine can have multiple different oxidation numbers. So it could be +1, it could be -1, it could be 0, it could be any number of things. Now for this KCl, when you look right here, do you see a charge for that substance? You don't, because KCl is a neutral ionic compound. Now, essentially what that means is, what do we have to add to +1 to get 0? So what does the oxidation number of chlorine have to be in order for us to add that to potassium's oxidation number and end up with 0? And the answer is -1. So chlorine, as a reactant, has an oxidation number of +3, and then as a product has an oxidation number of -1. Okay, so now we're left with oxygen. Oxygen, as you'll notice, well, there's 2 of them. It's O2. Is that O2 different from this O2? It absolutely is. So oxygen goes from having a charge of -2 to now, what charge is indicated right here? Nothing. It is neutral. Okay, so oxygen, in this case, as a diatomic element, is going to have an oxidation number of 0. Okay, so what does this mean? How does chlorine went from +3 to -1, and then oxygen went from -2 to 0? Well, how does that happen? Well, for something to be positive and then to become negative, what did we have to add with respect to subatomic particles? Our subatomic particles are protons, neutrons, and electrons. Electrons have a negative charge. We can gain and lose electrons and form different ions. Let's say that chlorine over here added a single electron. Well, that chlorine would now be +2. If we added a second electron, now it would be +1. A third electron, now it would have a charge of 0. If you added a fourth electron, that would get us our -1 charge. So chlorine added electrons. So from reading left to right on the reaction, we gained electrons. Therefore, chlorine gained electrons, therefore it got reduced, or it was reduced. Oxygen, on the other hand, well, to go from 0 or from -2 to 0, that means we didn't add an electron, but instead, if we lost one electron, now it'd go from -2 to -1. If we lost a second electron, that's what's going to take us from the charge of -2 to 0, in which case this was oxidized. Now, this question is kind of a twofer because it has us look at this reaction, gaining and losing of electrons. But if you look back on question number, question number 4. Question number 4 in this homework asks about classification of different reactions. And the first reaction that you're provided with is BaClO3 yields BaCl2 plus 3O2. Well, this oxygen on the reactant side is a part of compound. Therefore, it has an oxidation number of a negative or a positive. Doesn't really matter. Over here, it's a part of a diatomic, in which case, or it exists as its diatomic, in which case it has an oxidation number of 0. So this is what is known as a redox reaction. So oxidation and reduction has taken place. A substance has gained or lost electrons along the way of this reaction taking place. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you have a good one.